Okay. Hi, everybody in my group, in Fiercely Aligned Women, and on YouTube, on my channel, where this will eventually go. I'm really happy to be here. I hope my sound is okay. Let me know if it isn't. But I'm here with Krista, and we're going to be talking about decluttering. And so, although I can introduce her in some way, I want her to give like the full introduction. But all I know is that Krista runs a group of over 20K women, and she teaches them how to declutter. She teaches them how to free up space in their life, in their home. And yeah, I want to know more about how you got to doing this and how you kind of discovered that this was something you wanted to do and this is something you want to teach. And that whole trajectory of like your journey is really important to me. So let her rip. Tell
Yeah.
people.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited.
I know it's taken me a long time to get here because
Oh yeah, I forgot to say that.
the first thing I would like to share is that I have 5 kids and 2 of them are here with me today. So you might hear them or see them. But yeah, I have 5 kids and I teach moms how to declutter their homes, specifically if you still have kids at home and if you don't really want to become like a full-blown minimalist, which doesn't really work for moms. Like I feel like if we're like, we need to be minimalist, it's just like one more thing that we're supposed to do or should try to do as moms. And like, that's not the point of decluttering. Like the point of decluttering is to make it so that you have simplicity, like you have less to do overall. Like you can do the things that need to get done and you have space and time and energy to do things that you want to do.
Love that.
So yeah, I accidentally discovered decluttering. So the story is my husband and I were born and raised in Alaska. And then in 2013, when we had 3 kids, decided that we wanted to leave and he got a job in Florida. And like, long story short,
Big
we were
difference.
supposed to, yeah, like the furthest point you can go in the United States without, I just literally the furthest point you can go in the United States, I guess, unless we went like Florida to Hawaii, but you know,
That's true.
on the same continent. But we thought that we were going to have like time to like figure out how we were going to get there and bring our stuff. And he actually, they just chucked a toy across the room.
Yeah. Been there, done that.
I don't know why they're so wired today. Okay, hold on one second.
Yeah, it's fine. This is mom life. Hashtag people. And the beauty is we don't have to put our lives on hold. We can keep going, and the people around us can just understand that there's going to be some interruptions and it's all part of the ball game. So that is life. So I wanted to actually encourage you, if you're somebody that's wanted to get online, but you feel like nervous because your kids are always in the background, this is a great example of how that should matter. You could just still do it.
Yeah. All right. You can do it. I could hear you talking. Fighting over a plate. But
Love it.
that's, I mean, like the whole point of decluttering is so that you can like handle these things and they aren't the thing that like sends you over the edge. Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, we decided we were going to move from Alaska to Florida. We didn't have a lot of time. And when we were just like figuring out the logistics of how to get our stuff there and what we were going to do, it was actually more affordable to just rent a house that was furnished and start over. And so we got rid of like everything other than what would fit into our suitcases. And basically it was like a suitcase of clothes and a suitcase of toys. And then we moved and had a house that was furnished so that we could like get settled there and get our own things eventually. But at that point, like I don't think declutter, like the word declutter was not even in my vocabulary.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know that it was a thing that people did. It's not something that I had ever like intentionally done. But we got to Florida and like life got really easy for me as a mom. So I went from owning my own school in Alaska and like making pretty good money to Florida, where I had to work 2 jobs, like way more work. We didn't have any family nearby. It was like culture shock, climate shock. My husband's like starting up a business there. And on paper, like everything should have been way harder, but it wasn't. It was a lot easier. And I didn't really understand why. I just assumed it was like, oh, we're living on the beach. The beach is like a 10-minute drive. We can go to the beach after school, after work. Like it's sunny, like it's not dark and cold. Like you're in Canada, so
Yeah, it's very different.
Yeah. And I just thought it was that. And then in 2017, we moved to Idaho and I was pregnant and I was a part of a due date group, which I'm sure most of your audience knows what a due date group is, where we're all pregnant at the same time.
That's cool.
And yeah, we got really close. And once we had the babies, we actually started this thing called house tours because everyone in the postpartum phase was like really overwhelmed. They're like, my house is a mess. Like I'm so overwhelmed. I can't keep up on like laundry, like piles just everywhere. And can we just do a thing called like house tours and show each other our houses so that we feel better about it? Right. And it was really fun. And then when it got to be my turn, I'm like showing them my house. They're like, hold on a second. Like we all agreed that we would not like clean our houses before and like stage our houses. And I was like, I didn't, like, this is just the way my house is. And by watching those live videos, like with my friends, right, my online friends, I was able to like piece together what was different for me. Cause I'm like, that used to be me. Like I used to spend my nights and weekends catching up. Like I used to be like constantly nagging and frustrated by the messes or like embarrassed to have people over.
Yeah.
And it changed when we moved to Florida. And I was like, oh my gosh, like and I like told them, I'm like, guys, I think I figured something out. And I thought it was like revolutionary, right? Not even knowing that like decluttering was a thing or like minimalism was a thing or like Marie Kondo existed. Like I didn't know. I was
this was way before that.
No, it was after, like everybody already knew it. And I thought it was like this new thing. I was like, hey, I have a secret that everybody like, is like everybody knew but me, but
didn't employ.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it worked because I'm like, do you want me to tell you guys like what's different for me? Cause I'm like, I could see your guys' house tours and it's like totally judgment free, but you have a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what I used to struggle with too, when I had way too much stuff and now I don't have that much stuff. And they're like, yes, please teach us. And so I didn't even understand what had changed for me until that experience and like looking back in hindsight. And then from there, I started the group and was like, I'll show you guys how, like, I can teach you how to get rid of stuff, and kind of looked back on my story and experience of getting rid of all my stuff when we left Alaska, because all of those feelings and like experiences and struggles I had too, I just had to do it in a month instead of
accelerated.
Yeah. Of like freaking out because I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm getting rid of all this stuff. I'm getting rid of my kids' memories, like all of this wasted money, all of this wasted stuff, like just going into the trash, because a lot of it went to the trash, not all of it. And just like feeling really panicky over like losing the security of my stuff, which is another thing for moms, especially feeling like my kids are going to be mad at me or like hate me, and like just being totally overwhelmed by like all of the decisions and figuring out where to take things and then actually taking it places. So yeah, that's how I started. And that was in 2018. And it's been amazing to just like kind of like look back in hindsight on what I did and why it works, and then showing other moms how to do it and letting it unfold naturally as I help more moms and figure out like what it is that they're dealing with and what happens for them after they declutter too. Like what are all the benefits that they have?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it.
It's such a beautiful story. And yeah, I definitely want to get into a lot of that emotional stuff. A lot of the stuff that you posted recently and something that I've heard from my friends and what I feel in myself is that to throw things away for, our generation who have become like pretty environmentally conscious, right? It's like this painful experience where literally like we are putting something into the earth that will likely take 5 billion years to biodegrade or never. So it's like, it's hard because you are like, okay, I'm going to have to get better at not buying new things, but also what do I do with this existing stuff? And so that whole conversation, that whole struggle that we go through in our brain to try to justify throwing something away. And I feel like this wasn't a thing back in the day, my mom's time. My mom didn't have anything. She was like, I would love to just have one dress that I could wear out. I would love to have one pair of shoes that lasts me and that is like that I could wear out on a date. It's like that was very different. And now it's gone to the whole other direction where my my mom's generation kind of was like, well, we grew up with nothing, so we encourage you to have stuff and lots of it, and we're going to buy lots of it. And then I'm now going back to like, okay, let's be more minimal. And so, yeah, just like moving stuff out of my house and getting rid of stuff, I find a lot easier when I can sell it because I'm like, okay, somebody else is going to use it. Great. But when you accumulate so much stuff that you're like, I've been trying to sell the stuff for a month and it's still here, like at a certain point, you got to move the stuff. Like you got to actually let go of the stuff. And so, how do we do that? Especially since how you described on your page just recently, you were like on your in your group, you said something about like, believe it or not, bringing things to here we have Value Village, but any kind of thrift store, a lot of it will end up either in charitable places or other countries where they don't really want your stuff, or in the trash. So like, as much as we think we're doing the best thing, not throwing stuff out, sometimes it still ends up in the landfill. So that whole like insanely emotionally loaded conversation that we have in our heads, how do you help women through that? I guess it's a really big question, but how do you kind of go about teaching this part?
Yeah. I pulled up that post. Actually, I pulled up the 2 posts from the group just so I can
You're
like
really
read it
good.
off. Yeah. It starts with doing exactly what you did, like kind of walking yourself through the process of like what your parents went through
Yeah.
and maybe even their parents, and then where you are. So I've actually had my grandma on my podcast before because she
Oh, cool.
she went to school for like fashion design and manufacturing, I think, or something like that is what she went to college for. And so she's like late 70s, and I had her on the show just to talk about like what the fashion industry was like when she was like my age or younger, when she was like in her 20s, because I'm 33. And she's like, it was different, like people had less. It was like the wealthy people were the ones who bought their clothes. Everybody else made their clothes. And so
Mhm.
that's how she grew up. And so that's how she had like my dad, like she sewed their clothes. And she was kind of in the transition period where that was shifting from like, now wealthy people are the ones who have like their clothes handmade, right? And
That's true.
everybody else, or people who aren't wealthy, right, are, buy these mass produced clothing. And so she was kind of part of the transition where she started sewing clothes for like family and friends and like her church. And has watched it move to what it is now, where it's more expensive a lot of times to sew your own kids' clothes. Expensive for materials, right? But also expensive in like the learning curve, right?
Oh
And like
yeah. And
the
time.
learning, yeah, the learning curve, the time, the energy, the even like, because like the sustainability of the fabrics like
Yeah.
is more expensive. So that was an interesting conversation. So I think it starts with that, like just kind of understanding, and it's not just with clothing, like it's everything. It's our food, it's toys, it's
Yeah.
furniture, it's makeup. It's like everything is really fast and mass produced. And
Mhm.
so just understanding that so that you can see, because everything is patterns and cycles, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing where we are in the pattern and in the cycle. And then what the thing that I was talking about with like the waste is also understanding that you're not a bad person if your stuff goes to the landfill. And the truth is that whether you're the one that puts it into the landfill or not, that's where it's going to end up. Like the
Mhm.
majority of our stuff, that's where it's going to end up. And so it's just a matter of, do you want to be the one to take ownership and do it? Or do you want to do something like take it to a donation center where it feels better for you? And
Mm.
do you want to face the reality that a lot of what they're doing is taking it to the trash for you? And here in the United States, in a lot of areas, these large donation centers just aren't accepting things anymore, or they're extremely picky in what they do accept because it's expensive for them to trash things. Like they have to pay to empty out their dumpsters. They have to pay to transport things to the dump, or even in some extreme cases, like third world countries where they ship them to. And I have
Mhm.
an interesting story about this. And I feel like I need to like get my dad on camera to record this story too. But when I was 17, my dad and I went to the Dominican Republic because he lived there for 2 years. He did like a church mission there for 2 years. And so he took me back there to visit where he was. And we're driving this bus out into the middle of nowhere. And we see a guy on the side of the road wearing my dad's high school mascot t-shirt, like East High Thunderbirds in Alaska. And it's a very, like, it couldn't have been anything
very specific.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah. It could not have been anything else other than what we saw, which was the East High Thunderbirds. And we're like, what the heck was that guy really wearing a shirt from your high school? So I feel like I need to get that documented with my dad.
That's
because
crazy.
It sounds so crazy, right?
Yeah. It's so
but in the United States too, like we have the Super Bowl, like the NFL Super Bowl, and every year they print off t-shirts for the winners of like Super Bowl champions, this team, Super Bowl champions, the other team. And whoever loses, like all of those shirts get shipped off to like third world countries. And it's insane, right? Like it's just bananas. And so I tell those kinds of stories so that like us individually, we can take the pressure and the guilt off of ourselves for being in this part of the cycle that is on the tail end of understanding we've massively overconsumed, right? And overconsumption is the source of waste.
Yep.
The waste isn't because you're like finally being like, okay, it's got to get out of my house.
Yeah.
And eventually that's where it's going to end up anyway, because a lot of us we all have the same kinds of stuff, right? We all have the same kinds of clutter. Like we all have the same kinds of mass produced clothing and toys and furniture and whatever. And just understanding that so you can take the guilt off of yourself, and then understanding that the benefits of you decluttering serve the world at large way more than this one thing that we kind of hyper focus on, which is the landfill. And so it's a big conversation because I don't want to be like, yeah, just fill up a landfill. It's no big deal. Yeah. It's like, recognize where we are and do what you need to do. And then like for me, we got rid of all that stuff in 2013 and it was like devastating. It was like embarrassing. And I didn't even tell my group until like 2 years after I had started even talking about decluttering that a lot of my stuff went to the trash because I was embarrassed by it. I was like, felt so guilty.
Yeah.
But then I was like, if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here like being a lot more mindful in my consumption. I wouldn't be here being somebody who doesn't buy things like it's buy two, get one free. If I only need one, I'm only getting one. Yeah. Right. Or, you know, taking steps to be more mindful in my consumption so that for the next 75 years of my life, I am not contributing to the problem. And so
yes, exactly.
That I think kind of bigger, I think of like, yes, a lot of it's going to be trash and that really sucks, but big picture, like the benefits that you get and the time and space and energy and everything that you get because you do that is worth it.
Yes. Like you have time to raise your kids without stress. You have time to raise a business if you want. You have time for creative expression if you want, instead of spending all of your waking hours, every extra minute of the day, like you said, catching up, right? Catching up, decluttering, like not decluttering, but cleaning and throwing things in bins that are constantly out of bins. And, you know, they're toys that you're like, I don't think my kid has touched that in ages, and yet it's still here. And I keep putting it in the box because they're picking it up and throwing it away to access the other toys underneath. Right. So yeah, it's definitely a process. It's definitely a process. And I think for me, it's a little bit too convenient because I don't actually have to, well, I have two things going against me. A, the people around me are not on board. Like my spouse will literally be like, did you just post that rocking horse like for $5? Like, how dare you? And he'll go and take it and hide it from me so I can't sell it. So I literally am like, are you kidding me? Like I'm trying to improve my mental health and no one is letting me. And then I have, like, we live right next to another much bigger house. We're in the country. And so the two homes are right beside each other. The bigger home is my mother-in-law's home. And so this is where everything goes, that where like before I have a chance to, if I don't have time to bring it somewhere, right, to sell it or to bring it to a thrift store or throw it out, like I'm not ready yet. I'm not sure if I need to throw it out yet. It just goes here. And so this place just gets cluttered and this place is a disaster and the stuff is still around. It's just not in my immediate zone. And so that's not really fair. That's not fair to this house. That's not fair to when we're going to want to transform this house into something else or rent it out. Like we're still going to have to do the work. Still keeping the baggage around. And so there's like these things that I'm like, okay, I need to like figure out. And then they'll be like, okay, I have to just get rid of stuff without anybody knowing. And then I see a post that you do that's like, don't ever do that. That's really, that's really bad. You should talk to them before. And I'm like, fuck, what do I do? So then my mind's like spinning and I'm like, okay, I guess it's status quo until I can get my partner on the same page and or I am slowly at least getting rid of stuff that is just my own, that is mine. You know, I can take care of my closet. I can make sure that I really downsize on that, and then kind of move forward. And actually, as time progresses, and I ask my partner, like, hey, can I throw this out? You know, do you need this? He's a lot more relaxed now because he's real around me doing it because he's realizing the toll that it takes, right? And how much we're doing and how much maybe extra laundry we have too, you know, like, so I find it's worth the fight. It's not really a fight, but it's worth like continuing that trajectory of like, let's learn how to sustainably live without putting too much stuff into our lives. And then we don't have to like constantly be getting rid of stuff because that's kind of annoying, right? Because the more stuff comes in, the more you're constantly thinking about, oh, I need to get rid of stuff like every few months. So let's talk about that process of like, let's talk about how like mental health and like how your life changed once you've realized you've moved to this new place and you're like, oh my God, a lot of my stuff is gone. And so was it pretty quick where you like kind of realized how to fill that time, or were you a bit like thrown off by the newness of not having to declutter all day and clean up?
Yes. It was really dramatic for me. So one thing that you mentioned was, hang on just one second. My daughter's texting me because we have dentist appointments after school.
Oh, okay.
She's like, can you bring me my toothbrush? Okay. They have toothbrushes there, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I noticed it immediately. So the thing that you touched on was like getting your spouse on board. And I will say that anything, if you ever join Motherhood Simplified group, and this is for you too.
Yes, Motherhood Simplified.
You know what is best for your family. And so sometimes like the situations in our houses are so extreme that sometimes it is like, you just have to go make decisions on behalf of your kids to start, right? Or with a spouse, probably a little bit different. But the thing about a spouse is that just because we're like excited and we're like, oh my gosh, I learned this thing, I'm so excited, I know it's going to help us, that doesn't automatically mean that they are on the same page yet.
Right.
You might be in the same book, right? You're just a few pages ahead of them.
Right.
So letting them catch up, like you can always do that. But as far as like my relief and myself, it was immediate because we did it really dramatically, very extreme, which I don't recommend. Like we literally got rid of everything other than our suitcases.
Yeah.
Overnight, basically. Right.
That's huge.
And so it's kind of like when you go on vacation, you know, and you're like, wow, this is so nice. Right. And you like can feel
living out of a suitcase. Yeah.
You like relax, right? You're like, oh, this is so nice. I love it. But then you go back home. That happened. But then I did never go back home. Like it never ended. And so it only took like 2 weeks for me to be like, oh my gosh, I'm so uncomfortable. Like my dad called. I was like, hey, how's it going? And I just started crying. And I'm like, it's great. Like, I love it. We're happy. Things are so easy, but I just feel like the thing that was so specific was like James, like the dishes are done, right? Like the dishes are done and the house is cleaned up, but like James and I still aren't communicating well. And so clearly it wasn't the dishes, right? The problem with us wasn't the dishes and it wasn't the messes. The problem was that I don't think we know how to communicate together.
Because that's what you blamed on your relationship issues beforehand. That's such a huge aha moment.
And I think a lot of parents do that of like, oh, the problem is that we have kids, right? The problem is we have kids and we have these messes. And so there's no actual problem here, or we don't have time to address the problem because all of these other things. And that just like went away. Didn't have anything to hide behind. And it wasn't only true with like my relationship with him, but it was like true with my relationship with my kids of like, why is that hard for me to connect with them and play with them? What do I actually want in my motherhood? And then it was like
a big question.
Yeah. And then it like, I think you'll understand this. I think people will understand it, but it almost felt like I was just like this naked and like exposed version of myself. And I couldn't hide from even like my own thoughts. And so I was like, I feel like I need to like start therapy because I'm remembering all of these things. And I'm like, oh my God, I have so much that I need to focus on. And so
Yeah.
in that way, it was pretty immediate. And I share that story because the moms that I work with experience the same things. They just don't experience it like overnight like I did, but they're like, wow, okay, you weren't kidding that like I think I need to whatever it is that they want to do, right? Maybe it's
Yeah.
start exercising, maybe it's
Yeah.
journaling, maybe it's therapy, maybe it's date nights or whatever it might be. Maybe it's, I don't know, finances. Something's
Right.
going to come up where you're like,
Right.
oh, this is a big deal to me. And I have been really
Haven't
distracted.
been looking at it.
Yeah, I couldn't see it. I just didn't have like, because when you have all this clutter around you, especially as a mom, like it's basically a running to-do list in your head of like, got to do this and I got to do laundry and I got to clean up the toys and I got to figure out how to organize those and I got to like do all these other things that I'm doing. I got to raise these kids, teach them how to not fight, potty train them, feed them, get them to school,
Yeah.
daycare, work, bills, blah, blah, blah. And if you can just remove some of that, then you're like, oh, wow, there's more here. Right.
Yeah.
And not in that there's more of just like more stuff to do. Right. It's like there's more of what I actually want here. Right. Or there's more
Right.
of what actually matters.
More
Here. There's
depth.
space for it. Yeah. Yes.
Wow,
Depth.
that's huge. That's like a huge epiphany. I got chills. I got chills when you were talking about that. Yeah, like just the deeper inner work will reveal itself because, yeah, because you're not doing the busy work, right? And on top of that, I find a lot of people do use cleaning as therapy, and it is a form of therapy. And I find sometimes when I'm folding laundry, like I get ideas or I get good ideas, or, it's something that you're doing, and then other things will pop into your head once you're doing that. So it is a form of something to do that gives you, I don't know, some form of therapy. And some people find that pleasurable and others don't. And they want to avoid it like the plague because they're like, this mountain of clothes is so much bigger than 2 years ago when I had no kids or I only had two.
Right.
So yeah, it's just, and the pile just keeps growing and growing and growing. And you're like, how do I manage this? And again, yeah, like when we're fighting with our spouse and we think it's about all the stuff, but really maybe it's not. That's
Okay,
huge.
Let's talk about this too. The cleaning and it being like self-care. So
Yeah.
I've told you before, I'm a quadruple Virgo, right?
Yes.
My big sun, like if you are into astrology, the big three is like sun, moon, rising. My sun and my rising are Virgos. It's just like boom, power Virgo. My Mars
Super Virgo.
Super Virgo. Like the Virgo is Virgo, which means that I really love cleaning. And I read this thing the other day that it's like if you work with your mind, relax with your body. If you work with your body, relax with your mind. Right. So I think of like if a construction worker,
So interesting. Yeah.
come home and like read, right? Or
yeah,
I don't know, make a spreadsheet. Sounds terrible, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But for me, like I'm in my head all of the time. And so
Right.
I find moving my body relaxing. And in the past, when I was cleaning my house, it was like full of resentment, full of like urgency, but like urgency that I wasn't in control of. It's like, I just have to do these things. And now even with my cleaning, like it's a form of like therapy. Like if I like am like mopping the floors, like that's just the repetitive motion. And there's lots of studies out there. Like if you do like EMDR and like bilateral stimulation stuff, like washing windows, or I'll do like weird things of like wash my doors, like bring in the good vibes. And it's just like the repetitive back and forth motions is also just like another layer of me being able to actually like care for myself. And I tell my kids, my younger kids now, like, it's so fun to like take care of our house. Right. And so they'll like clean up their stuff and they're like, I love taking care of my house.
That's so cute.
Yeah. But there is even, speaking on depth, like I've been able to even find like more depth in those kinds of like repetitive tasks,
Right.
like dishes, laundry, sweeping, whatever else that you have.
Yeah. The basics
has to be done.
Yeah.
It never goes away. Yeah, it's been an interesting thing to uncover the last 4 years.
I freaking love that. Yeah. And you know what? What's funny is like, yeah, like me saying the word decluttering, people that probably saw that, they did not assume we were going to talk about the deep stuff. But if they know me, they should know that I'm not
Right.
just going to talk about like, do you get rid of your one sock mystery socks or do you keep them? Like, that's not like, sure, we could talk about that, but that's not really what we want to talk about. We want to talk about clearing your life, simplifying your life to the point where the stuff that you're constantly making excuses for that you can't do, that you love to do, that you're like, yeah, like what is that creative thing I like to do before that I when I had time, or what is that when was the last time I did a yoga class if you love that, or like when was the last time you did that for yourself, and just constantly, and like this idea of like blaming our kids and blaming our messes for our lack of time, the most important precious resource in the world, is kind of getting old. So it's like, okay, how can we not say like, oh, like you're lying, it's not really that you don't have time, but how can we not like blame and shame moms, but how can we actually show like, okay, what are some simple ways that you actually can make space, make time, make things easier on yourself?
I agree. Like, let's just
Like,
stop shaming each other. Be like, if
yeah,
you wanted it, you'd try harder.
exactly.
Great. Now I'm so inspired. Thanks for that. I just had to try harder. I just had to like want it more.
I know.
My bad.
Let me just manifest a clean house right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. The other thing I was going to say is I was talking to some moms in the group too on the same thing of like on time, right? Because
Yeah.
I try not to like shame moms and be like,
Yeah.
everybody has the same 24 hours in a day, right?
Yeah.
Like, we know that. But like you said, it's tired. We're tired of hearing it. But they were saying that as they started to declutter, especially with things like wanting to like mindfully declutter, whether it's like not taking things to the landfill and making sure that we can get it to people who actually like need it and want it.
Yeah.
So many of those moms consistently say that decluttering allowed them to learn how to actually value their own time. So they're like, I realize like I'm sick of spending my time this way, and I'm going to make these small changes that I know will free up my time, but also really just give me something to do that I can actually practice like tangibly, that shows the people in my world and myself that I am valuing my time, right? I'm choosing to declutter some stuff. I'm choosing to donate it instead of like bring it to my friend, or maybe that means I'm just going to trash it instead of donating it, because I'm like, my time matters too, right?
Yeah.
So there's lots of lessons within decluttering too, like that, where it's like, oh, I get to practice advocating for myself. I get to practice valuing my time. I get to practice like setting boundaries with my kids and my spouse and myself. And yeah, I mean, I think that's way better than being like, I should just try harder. I should just like schedule a nail appointment or whatever it is, right?
Yeah. More self-care in that way as opposed to self-care of stuff that's going to make like long-term difference in your life.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Can we actually just define the term decluttering as well? Because like it's not just putting things in nicer boxes, right? It's not just getting another IKEA shelf and organizing things. Like it's deeper.
Yes. That's the first question usually that I ask moms when they're like, I've tried decluttering and it hasn't worked, right? Or I've been decluttering for a long time. I ask them, so when you say that you've been decluttering, have you actually been like getting stuff out of your possession for good? Like that's the definition of decluttering. It's like putting it into your car and driving it away to another location or having somebody pick it up and take it away. And it's like no longer in your possession. And sometimes they say yes, but then sometimes they are like, oh, no, like I'm just like shifting it around inside of my house, right? Like into different bins. I'm like trying different like shelves. I'm getting like over the door hangers. I'm getting like bins for under my bed or in the storage area, like basement, whatever.
More hidden.
Or they're like, I put it in the closet and then it all comes back out, or I put it all into this one area and it just like keeps spilling over. And I'm like, well, around. Yeah, you're clutter shifting, right? Like decluttering is getting it out of your possession for good. So if you're clutter shifting and you're like, you just had a light bulb moment of like, oh my gosh, like, okay, I have to actually get it out of my house. That's for you.
Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. if you're like, okay, I have been getting rid of things, but I still feel like it's not working. There's two things to consider. Number one, we really don't realize how much stuff we actually have.
Oh my God, that's so true.
Yeah. Like we've moved like once a year. We haven't moved since 2020, but for about a decade, we moved like once a year, sometimes more, like every 9 months. And so I was always so surprised by how much stuff we had. So number one, we don't realize how much stuff we have and how long we've been accumulating. Like for
Mhm.
me, I was like, decluttering wasn't even my vocabulary. It just
Yeah.
wasn't even something that I had ever seen or was taught or had heard about. So a lot of us just don't know, like things come
Yeah.
in, things have to go out. We have a lot of stuff. And so you have to understand that it's going to take you a long time to get that stuff out.
Mhm.
But then the second thing to consider is how quickly is more stuff coming into your space, whether it's,
Exactly.
yeah, stuff that you are purchasing. And when it comes to the waste, kind of like what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation is, are you buying things that you already have because you can't find it, or you forgot that you had it, or you're like, I'm going to get a backup because I know we're going to lose it, right? So that's one thing to consider, is like how much is actually coming into your house by your own means, but also maybe you get hand-me-downs and you've got to learn how to say no, right? Like that's
Mhm.
self-advocacy, setting boundaries,
Yeah.
family members and friends who give you way too much stuff and you have to start telling them, thanks so much for thinking of us. We appreciate it and love you. But maybe you can find somebody else who needs this because, man, we don't have room for it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like always leading with like gratitude and thanks,
Yeah.
but also no thanks. Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, considering how much is actually coming in relation to how much is leaving your house and how much actually needs to leave in order for you to catch up on all that accumulation you've done for years or maybe even decades.
Mhm. That's
And how many
beautiful.
kids have you been accumulating for? Right. That's another thing. It's like,
Yeah.
if you have
Yeah.
kids, it comes with having more stuff naturally, but it doesn't
Totally.
have to mean that,
Doesn't have to be overwhelming.
yes, it doesn't have to
Yeah.
consume your life.
So speaking of that, do you have some sort of rule or something that you use with your kids in terms of toys or the amount of stuff that they're allowed to ask for? Like if you're out and about, how do you gauge that? Are you like the voice, the overriding voice, or is your husband like, do you have a contract of like, okay, so we buy a maximum of this amount of things or toys per, like, because 5 kids, if you buy 5 toys, that's already 5 more things in your house. So it's like, how do you manage that?
Yeah. Um, so for the most part, like I don't really buy my kids like toys or like extras just for fun.
Yeah.
Like I just don't do it anymore. And that actually stopped when we moved to Florida, um, just naturally,
Yeah.
where they had their suitcase of toys and they were happy. And I remember very clearly us going to Target and being like, well, we'll just go see if they have anything, that we can get that's like cheap or whatever. And like just walking down the aisles and me being like, I don't want any of this stuff. Like, I'm not going to buy them anything today because why would I? Like, they're
Mm-hmm.
happy with their suitcase of stuff. Um, but yeah, outside of like birthdays and holidays, I really don't buy them extras like toys or anything. And with 5 kids, I mean, that's basically like a birthday every other month, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's not that we're not
True.
bringing things in, but then for birthdays and holidays, it's pretty simple because I'm like, I can like pay attention to what they're asking for, like what they
Right.
want, what would be fun. My biggest rule that I follow is like, does it fit in the space that we have? Right. Does it fit
Mm.
into, so like we have toddlers. So down in our main living space is where their toys live. Because I don't want them like
Yeah.
choking and stuff in their bedroom or doing something crazy in their bedroom. But like, does it fit on the shelf that we have for the toys? Like
Mm.
that's the guideline. And then we have like an arts and crafts shelf, and that's also the guideline. Like, does it fit onto the arts and crafts shelf?
Mm.
We use it up. I think that's like a big misconception people have about me is they think that we don't like do anything creative or fun, which I mean, look, like,
Yay! It's the opposite.
like we have things. It's just that it fits onto our shelf. We
Goes
use
back.
it up and then I get more, which in the past it was like basically having an entire craft store in my house, especially as a former teacher,
Oh yeah.
having like more stuff than we could ever actually create with. Like
Wow.
honestly, could have
Wow.
just like been good for an entire lifetime, I'm sure, of like
Yeah.
Random crafts.
Totally. I feel that. Yeah, like every time we have like the dollar store and I'm always like, okay, I'm gonna get more crafts. And I'm like, well, maybe I should take inventory of what we have and what we don't have
Yeah.
before doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. That's the biggest rule is like, does it fit in the space that we have? That just keeps it easier in my brain too. Like with 5 kids, like I don't have a
Yeah,
lot of brain space. Like I forgot my own
so
phone drawer
true.
this morning.
Yeah.
Um,
That makes a lot of sense.
yeah. So I can like see what we have. I can tell when the markers are dying instead of like, oh, we
Right.
always use more markers, which is what it used to be like.
Yeah.
We'll always need more markers, right? Now I'm like, we're gonna wait until the markers are dead and then
Yeah.
we'll get more.
I'm getting
Um,
really frustrated with marker companies. Like, is there a place you can send them? Like, why are they so plastic?
I know. Seriously, that's a great question.
Because I
That's a
think I
great
heard
question.
someone say that, like, the main brand of markers, what is it? Like the most
Crayola.
popular? Yeah, Crayola. Like, I think you can send them. I don't know. I'm wondering
Yeah.
if that's true or if that's a scam.
I think you can. And you can also send them your old broken crayons. But
Right.
yeah, there's so much waste in markers. I didn't even think about that until you just said it.
Oh, it's really
There has
sad.
to be a better way.
There has to be a better way. It's like an infomercial.
My
Okay,
granddad. Yes,
we're
there has to be a better way.
I know we're like almost at an hour. Wow, that went back by fast. Okay, let's before I tell people how to actually find you and how to join your amazing group. Let's just do one little thing or tip that you have, if that's okay. If somebody's like looking at their house and they're like, like where do I begin? Where do you suggest they begin? Like how small of a project do we start with first so that we don't lose our shit and start pulling our hair out
Yes.
and
Okay.
give up?
So yeah, there's two approaches. And I think that for moms, this first one is usually the best one. Start with anything small. Like it doesn't matter how small it is. The smallest things are actually the best places to start, especially if you're overwhelmed, because it's going to be something that you can generally do start to finish pretty easily and feel good about it. Like the most important thing I think is to show yourself like a quick win of like, I did it. That wasn't so bad. Right. Like I made the decisions, and decluttering is just, a series of making decisions. Like, do I keep it? Do I not keep it?
Yeah.
Do I donate it? Do I trash it? Right. Um, so it's flexing your decision-making muscle too. Of like
Yes.
start somewhere very simple. I think a lot of times as moms, like we want to jump to like all the sentimental things, right? Like all the bins of like kids
So
stuff.
true.
And that's probably the hardest place to start. Like start somewhere simple. Start with like under your sink or your laundry room space, like your laundry room cabinets, because there's not anything sentimental under there. There's usually a lot of trash. And
Yeah.
like that's a space that you have to use all the time anyway, right? You have to do laundry. So if you declutter that space, get rid of the trash, get rid of the duplicates, make it easy to do laundry in there, right? And you're like, oh, nice. Okay. Now doing the laundry is easier. Now maybe as I'm doing laundry, I can just declutter things right out of the dryer, right? So yeah, just start small, start simple, and let that momentum carry you. Spice cabinet is another good one.
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's so funny because people don't realize oftentimes like how many expired spices they have or how many duplicates they have. They're like, oh my gosh, I had like 5 cinnamons. And I just keep buying more because I'm like, I kind of like markers, right? Oh,
Yeah.
we'll always use markers, right? We'll always use more cinnamon or
Yeah.
whatever.
Exactly. Oh my God.
So yeah, starting small with that. Or maybe if you have older kids and you have like bandwidth, or maybe you have a lot of like in-person support, start with the thing that's most overwhelming, right? If you're just like, the laundry never ends and you know that doing the laundry is going to be a beast of a project, but it will be worth it for you, you can start there. But for most moms in general, we lack community and support, right? We lack the time, we lack the energy. So starting with those smaller projects frees up your space, gives you that practice so that you can tackle those bigger projects easier.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that so much. I could ask a million questions and I just won't because it's just a rabbit hole. Like just stuff that from your past. Like there's so many, the sentimental stuff is really where it's hard. Stuff from your past, stuff where you're like, I used to fit in this and now I still do, but I feel like it's not me anymore, but it's still good quality stuff, right? Like there's just everything. It's so you could go down the rabbit hole with every single item. And I think that's probably, like you said, starting to flex your decision making skills is important because it starts you off and then you kind of get on a roll and then it just becomes easier and easier. But yeah, I definitely have stuff in boxes where I'm like, I don't know, like, do I want to wear this again? I feel like I'm never going to be that person again almost. It's like, yeah. Anyways, I find that really interesting and
yeah.
funny.
It's a grieving process basically
It
for moms,
is.
especially if, like, for me, I was like a teen mom. So I had my kids super young. Like, I didn't really have a life before I had my kids, but for a lot of moms who have like a life before kids, like, it's basically a grieving process. Right. And I
Yeah.
try to, let moms know that it feels like a loss of your stuff, because it is, right? You're getting rid of this stuff, but there's ways to like process your grief, and starting small with those things gives you experience, it gives you wisdom, but it also gives you space, right? So you can be
Yeah.
like, no, I want to keep this stuff, right? Like, I know that I'm not going to wear it, but
Mm-hmm.
for now I want to keep it. Like, there was a mom in the group who was talking about, she got a gift, like it's a purse. And she's like, I really don't want to keep it. Like, it's not my style. It was a great gift. And for me, what I told her is like, the reason I declutter is so that I have space where I can keep something like that, even though I'm not going to use it, just to honor the gift, right? And be like, wow, she
Mm.
thought of me. She made this for me. I'm never
Yeah.
going to wear it. I'm never going to use it, but I'm going to keep it in my closet for now because I've got space
Yeah.
until I like process that and be like, that was great. And now I'm ready to let it go.
Mm. That's beautiful. Yeah. It gives you a little bit more time to like, yeah, not do something too rash and then regret it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I
Yeah.
love this conversation. Okay, let moms know where they can find you, how you can help them, and yeah, like where they can find you and work with you a little bit closer.
Yeah. Motherhoodsimplified.com is my website, and Motherhood Simplified is my podcast. If you like listening
Right.
to
Yes.
things, we've got the group, which is Motherhood Simplified, parentheses, the group. Yeah. Motherhood Simplified, Motherhood_simplified on Instagram, if you like that. But yeah, those are all the places.
Awesome.
And
And we'll have all the links for you in the comments so you can check them out there.
thank you.
And if you have any last words,
I don't think so. I feel like I said many words.
you did.
Thanks for having me.
It's a good amount of words. Perfect amount,
Yeah.
I would say.
So many words. Thank you for having me. That's what I'll
Thank
say.
you for
Thank you for
being
having
here.
me.
And I really appreciate this because I did want to talk about the emotional parts of the whole process, which I think, you can watch one of those Netflix shows and you can like be like, okay, this is the process of decluttering, like A, B, C, and D. But there's like you start and then like you can't get over that emotional part, the environmental part, and you just really get stuck there. And I feel like that probably happens a lot more often than people realize. And so, yeah, I definitely want to dive in there because I feel like maybe this conversation wasn't had before. And so, why not have this be the place where we have it?
Yes, exactly.
All right, beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on here. And if you want to join Krista's groups or webs or any of her courses, she's got some amazing ones. Then definitely check out her website, check out her group. I would be a part of it because it's super fun. And okay, I'm gonna go offline now here. Right. Stop live stream.
Goodbye.
Yay, we did it! Yay. Before the holidays.